Hey, what's going on, guys? Alex Music here from Mr. Build It. So this is my house. It was built in 1983, and today I'm going to show you how we made it look like a brand new construction home with these window casings. So without wasting time, let's get into the video. Let's go.
All right, well, our house is one of the typical houses that was built in the early 1990s, and they come with these really dated trim pieces. We wanted to update them to the bigger, fatter, more modern pieces to really kind of modernize our house, if you will. So to remove the existing trim, the majority of the time they're being held with brad nails and silicone completely around it. So we're going to use a utility knife or a box cutter knife and cut the bead of silicone both on the inside part of the window casing and the outside part of the trim. This will make it a lot easier to remove that trim and not damage any drywall. Once you get all the CAULK cut around the perimeter of the trim, you're now safe to remove that trim. You'll need three basic tools: a nice stiff utility knife, a 15-inch utility pry bar, and a hammer. And the way I like to do it is use the corner of the utility knife, drive it in behind the trim piece, and then once you get it there, wiggle it back and forth, create some space, drive the utility pry bar behind it, and then use both the utility knife and the pry bar kind of simultaneously behind one another to pry small increments of the trim piece off the back of the wall until the entire piece is removed. You'll be surprised that you'll damage far less drywall, and you'll actually be able to remove the entire trim piece at once without it breaking. Once you remove all the trim work, you'll see that you'll be left with brad nails and pin nails that are left in the window casing and the studs. So you can either A, remove all those nails, or B, simply just do what I did. I'll just grab a hammer and then just drive them all the way in flush. That way it won't interfere with the new trim that'll be coming in. Also, it's a good idea to take that same utility knife and scrape off all the pre-existing CAULK that's on both the drywall and the window casing. Trust me, you want to do this if you want a nice finished product. I've learned this lesson the hard way. Now, when it comes to actually installing the trim, or the window casing as the pros call it, for the sides of the casing, I'm using a 1x4 MDF, and then for the top and bottom, or the head and apron, I'm using a 1x6. Same stuff, MDF. One rule of thumb, don't forget when installing the head and apron, make sure when you create the length cut, you use a round over bit to match the entire round over part of that trim piece so it looks nice. And then when it comes to actually installing it, you have to use a brad nailer. You can get away with anything between a 16 and an 18 gauge. You can use a battery powered one like I'm using, or a pneumatic compressor one. Whatever you got, just use that. One rule of thumb is make sure that when you actually install it, try to drive those brad nails into the actual studs or the window casings that are behind the trim. This will ensure that the project is installed correctly. Basically, there's really no science behind it. And when it comes to actually using the blade, you don't have to use a finishing blade, but just make sure to know that on the edges that you'll make the cut, specifically on the apron and the head. Sometimes you could see the saw marks, so keep a little sandpaper handy to get rid of those. Now, I did have somebody ask me why not make your own trim work by just buying like a 4x8 sheet of MDF. That's usually like 30 bucks, ripping it all on your table saw and installing it. Well, you could totally do that. That's an option. The only issue is by the time you rip it on your table saw, use a router to round over the edges and then prime it, then paint it and install it takes way too long. So for me personally, I want to save myself time, buy the stuff that's already pre-made, pre-done, and then spend the rest of my day and or days to actually focus on doing the finishing touches on the trim work.
Guys, let's talk advantages and disadvantages. Advantage, yes, cordless, battery powered, expensive, nice and shiny. The problem is 3-inch nails, you have to use both hands to push it in, or else the nail doesn't go all the way in. Number 2, weighs as much as of a newborn kid. This Old Faithful trusty pneumatic, 6 pounds maybe, bought it at Harbor Freight for like 20 bucks. Super powerful, nice and light, especially on a 14-foot tall ladder. Way would rather have this. Yeah, you get your compressor and your hose, but you know what? Those pancake compressors, really cheap on Craigslist. This is Harbor Freight. I like this. I don't like that. I like this. But I still use that. But I like this.
Speaking of finishing touches, we now have to fill all the nail holes that are left from the brad nailer. So I'm just using a wood putty to fill in the hole. You don't have to put too much, just enough to cover it. Keep in mind, by putting too much, you're gonna have to sand too much. So a little will do it, just cover the hole enough with a little bit of rim outside of it. Then I'm gonna use 150 grit sandpaper with a little sanding block behind it. You can use a piece of scrap wood or an official sanding block if you want, it doesn't matter. And then sand it just enough to take off the outside rim of the wood filler, making sure that only the inside part of the hole is filled, and also not to sand off all the primer that's on your MDF. That's counterintuitive. So just find the good happy in between and you'll be surprised how quickly it goes. Once everything's sanded, make sure you use like a leaf blower or an air compressor or whatever you want just to blow off all the dust that's on the window casing. It's gonna make it so much easier to have a nicer application of CAULK for this next following step. All right, like I mentioned, the CAULK. When it comes to applying the CAULK, a couple of tips I'll tell you. Get the CAULK that has the 20-minute curing time, and it's paintable. That's very, very important. When it comes to applying, create a small cut, apply it, and then here's the kicker. Get a damp rug. Get your finger wet in it. So once you apply it, use a finger that's already moist from the water in the rag, and then just do one swift motion to push all the CAULK behind the trim. This will actually make sure it looks nice, flush, and actually uses it to be an adhesive for the trim. Now, when it comes to painting, obvious points: mask everything off, protect your windows, protect your walls. Now, when it comes to painting, you can always roll it on, you can always brush it on. I personally recommend spraying it. It comes out way better, way more professional. You don't have to buy yourself an expensive $400 gun. What you can do is spend like 50, 60, 70 bucks, get yourself what's called an HVLP sprayer. That's high volume, low pressure. It's ideal for like clear coats and stains, basically thinner materials. With latex paint, you gotta dilute it a little bit, which is nice because you can just use water. Pour it in a cup, leave a few inches off the top, and then just use a stir stick with a little water and kind of thin it out to the best, finest mist that it'll shoot out. The product that I'm using here is from HomeRite. They were nice enough to send it to me. It's called a Finish Max. That's the model, and it applies really well. I didn't have any issues at all. Just be mindful to have a good steady pattern. Leave yourself enough distance so you don't get too many runoffs on it. Once the paint dries, also the advantage of spraying it is between second and third coats, the drying time is far quicker than to roll it on, so that's another advantage. Once everything's dry, remove all the plastic, kick back, and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. It does mean the world to me. If you're brand new to the channel, you like videos like this, subscribe. The link will be right over here. A couple of the videos for you guys to check out if you choose to do so. In the description, I'll put a link for all the tools that I use, my social media accounts, including my brand new podcast, Pillow Talk, that's currently out. Make sure you like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Love you guys. Thanks for the support. Bye.